The movie starts with a man running from someone in a building that looks like gallery of art or a museum. After passing through a hall, he takes one of the art out and that rings the alarm. The guy falls down and the man behind him says stop and asks, "Where is it?" "You and your brother possess what is not yours." The man lying down says, "I don't know, what are you talking about?" The guy holds the gun and asks, "Is it a secret you will die for?" "As you wish." Just when he was about to fire, the man says stop and tells him this. In the sacristy, the Church of Saint-Sulpice lies rose line. Beneath the rose line. The guy with the gun says thank you and shoots him. The killer walks out and wounded guy draws something on the walls. Professor Robert Langdon giving lecture to students and asks them about different images. All students answer wrong. Especially, the Poseidon's trident. Later, he is giving out his sign on his book when he is approached by a guy from DCPJ, Lieutenant Collett, and shows a picture. He asks for his expertise in this matter. The guy died was Robert's acquaintance. He waited for him but he never showed up. It was strange for Professor. Why would someone do this to him? Monsieur Saunier was his name, the person who died. Collett tells him that what you see in the photo, he did that to himself. Professor goes and meets Captain Fash. Fash takes him down the gallery. Fash asks him how much he knew about Saunier. Professor tells him not much, they only met once. He says it's surprising. Fash asks him, "You had meeting with Saunier tonight, how?" "By email," Professor replies. "He knew I was in Paris." They go down to the floor where they keep paintings and other things safe. They stop in Grand Gallery, and Professor says, "This is where you find the body?" He saw the floor and there it was. Professor assesses the situation and reads the symbols. The Vitruvian Man, the Da Vinci's most famous sketch, and a pentacle. Fash asks for meaning. Professor replies pentacle is a pagan religious icon. Fash replies with devil worship, on which Professor says this is symbol for Venus, the female half, called divine goddess by religious historians. Fash argues why he would draw a female goddess on chest. Then he shows him a writing on the floor that stats draconian devil. "Oh, lame saint." Professor says this doesn't mean anything to me. Professor and Fash are talking and Officer Sophie Nauvoo walks in. Straightaway tells Fash that she has decoded the symbols, it's Fibonacci series. She brought a message for Langdon from embassy. She gives him a number and tells her to call this number. Nauvoo records a message for him that he is in danger and he has to keep things secret from Fash. Fash asked Professor that series is not in order, is it meaningless? Professor replies, "I will come back from toilet and have a look." In toilet, Sophie is there. She asks him if he has a message from Saunier. She tells him that he is under surveillance. And he was brought here so he could spit out the truth. He is a suspect. He checks his pocket and finds a bug in his pocket. Sophie tells him that he is leashed and he cannot run. Sophie asks him what he thinks about the fourth line of text, and tells him that Fash brought you here for a confession. Later, they talk about how Saunier contacted him at around 3 p.m. The alarm was triggered at 8 p.m., but Professor was giving lecture at 9 p.m. Also, Professor turned his privacy light on in hotel room until 8:30. She tells him that Fash is sure that you are behind this and he won't stop until he makes a case against you. Professor finds out that Sophie is Saunier's granddaughter and apparently he wanted them to meet, as dying wish. Sophie throws the bug in a truck and divert Fash's attention. Both Sophie and Professor go back into the gallery to look for more hidden information. Professor looks at the Fibonacci series again and tries to see through. He finds that the letters were also out of order like series. And from that, he makes a name, Leonardo da Vinci, the Mona Lisa. They look at Mona Lisa's painting and find blood there and another writing, so dark the con of man. From there he breaks the code and next clue they find it Madonna of the Rock. Behind the painting they find something like a key, that looks like cross. The guard runs in and to save their life they try to damage the painting. It works and they get to run out of the gallery. Solace comes to the church Saint-Sulpice. He asks Nun about the rose line. She tells him that rose line is any line that goes from north to south poles. There are 135 brass markers in streets of Paris, the world's first prime meridian, which pass through this very church. Solace breaks the floor of the church and finds an artifact. Sophie sees a man doing drugs in the park and gives him money for everything and tells him to go and eat. He leaves and now they have a place to think. Sophie remembers she used to do treasure hunts as a child. They talk about the Priory of Sion. All the stories ended in bloodshed and they were butchered by the church. It all started when the French king conquered Jerusalem 1,000 years ago. It was done by the Priory of Sion and Knights Templar. The conquest was basically to find an artifact lost at the time of Christ, and the church was ready to kill for it. Professor tells Sophie a little history about Templars. After the conquest, they suddenly stopped searching for the artifact and went back to Rome, where they blackmailed the papacy, and the papacy declared these Templars of limitless power. By the 1300s, knights became too powerful. Later, the Vatican gave secret order to kill all the Knight Templars and labeled them as Satan worshippers. Templars were exterminated by October 13, 1307. The Vatican found nothing from the priory, and those who lived went underground. Since then they are again looking for the artifact. Professor, then, tells her that the artifact is Holy Grail. They look at the key and see some markings on it. Sophie finds out that this is a street address. Bishop Manuel meets another bishop and council is commenced. Bishop Manuel asks for 20 million euros for a secret mission he is working on. Chairman asks him when will his mission commence. On which he replies, tonight. Vatican is not willing to fund us. He tells them that soon the remaining members of Priory will be killed and Grail will be destroyed. Sophie and Lang reach the address and find a keyhole. They open the door and security asks how can he help. They show him the key, on which he tells them to take the door on the right. On monitor, he refreshes the screen and finds their pictures as most wanted criminals. This turns out to be a bank. The manager, André, welcomes them and tells them about the establishment. The bank's history is as old as banking. He tells them to put the key in the system and account number, and their box will be retrieved. After opening the box, they find an artifact in there with a rose symbol. This is when manager walks in and alerts them of the police. He tells them that their account is one of their oldest client, and he will help them. He takes them to a chamber and tells them to get into the van. André ditches security and drives them out. André stops in the middle of a forest and tries to steal the artifact from Sophie. He takes out his gun and tells them he waited 20 years for someone to come after that box. Fortunately, a bullet shell gets stuck in the door and door of the van could not properly close. Professor kicks the door and André gets hit on the head badly. Taking advantage, both Sophie and Lang get into the front seats and drive off, leaving André behind and firing at them. Lang again asks her, what is she hiding from him? He tells Sophie furiously that their life is in danger and if she is hiding anything she should tell him now. Fash arrests André and inquires from him about Sophie and Lang. He is charged with aiding suspects and might have jail term. Fash offers to help him and in return he activates a tracker in the van. Sophie and Lang reach Chateau Violette to see Lang's close friend, Sir Lee Teabing. Fash finds their whereabouts and calls Bishop Manuel. Lang asks Lee about the Priory of Sion. He tells them that there are always 4. 1 Grand Master, and 3 Seneschaux. They make guardians of the Grail. He says, Grail is not a cup. To understand Holy Grail you will have to understand Holy Bible. It is not a source of God's power, it is the source of Church's power on land. Later, he talks about Constantine, and how he was baptized at deathbed. 3 centuries after Christ's death, Christians grew in number and started war against pagans. Here Lang added that if it was pagans who waged war, but we are not sure. Later, in 325 AD, Constantine decided to unite Rome under Christianity as single religion. That's when Constantine also decided the mortality of Jesus, that he is divine. According to early Christians, Jesus was a mortal man, but Constantine made him look like a god. Lang argues that he simply sanctioned the widely held idea for his own benefit. Then Lee Teabing shows Sophie what Holy Grail really is. According to Lee, it's a woman, Mary Magdalene, the Jesus wife. And that she is the chalice, the Holy Grail. Next, Salas jumps over the wall and gets into the chateau, with the intention to kill Lang. Lee and Sophie continue their discussion. Lee further tells Sophie that Mary Magdalene was pregnant at the time of crucifixion and that the blood of Jesus continues through a girl. After Jesus, in next 3 centuries millions of women were killed. Lee adds on that this is what Priory of Sion is hiding from the world. The biggest secret in human history. That the throne of Jesus lives on. Priory would kill for this secret. Priory is the protector of Jesus' descendants and Mary Magdalene. Lee then inquires from Sophie about further information that she remembers. Any song or music. Salas hits Lang and puts gun on Sophie and asks Lee to put the artifact down on the table. Luckily, Lee hits him with his stick and Sophie helps him with that. Salas is lying unconscious on the floor. Lee looks at his body and sees that he has been torturing himself. Police breaks into the palace. Lang, Sophie and Lee leave the chateau from safe passage. They find out that this Opus Dei is a Catholic sect. Lee adds that there is a war going on between Priory and another group within Catholic Church that has been killing the descendants. Lee says that it would be catastrophic if the world finds out that Church's version of Jesus is inaccurate. Bishop Manuel receives his $20 million from head of the council. But the old guy asks him if he has to kill the descendant of Christ, would he kill him like the people before us? To which Manuel replies, Christ died for us. So, too, may be the fate of his seed. Sophie tells Lang that once we land you should go to your embassy because they are not after you. They are after me in this idiotic box. Lang tells her he won't leave her alone in all this. Sophie asks Lee about what happened to Holy Grail. Lee tells her no one knows. Lang picks up the artifact and puts a pencil in hole. A small piece fell out, another clue which leads them to London. Leigh's plane lands in London and police also arrives at the airport. Still, Lee was able to con them and successfully was able to escort them out of the airport. Sophie, Lang and Lee reach Temple Church. They look for the tomb with orb. Unfortunately, just when they were looking for the tomb, Salas comes in, grabs Sophie and puts a knife on her neck. Remy the butler walks in behind him and puts gun on Lang's head. He switched sides. Remy tells Salas to throw Lee into the trunk. Turns out the butler is the teacher. Here again Luck sides by Lang and Sophie and they again run away. Remy and Salas are driving together. Salas asks him if he is the teacher. Salas tells him that he can still be of service. But Remy says you have done enough. Remy drops Salas at a safe house of Opus Dei. On the other side, Remy takes the money from the real teacher. And says that his secret will go to grave with him. Teacher gives him wine to drink, which is poison, and Remy also dies there. In next scene, it is shown that Sir Lee is actually the teacher. Lee calls police and give them information about Sophie and Lang. Lang takes Sophie to tomb of Isaac Newton. He tells her that Newton was also a Grand Master of the Priory. Lang figures out that Newton's funeral was presided over by Alexander Pope, his close friend. They look for the clues in the church. Lee is already there. He walks in and tells Sophie that she is the last of the Guardian of the Grail. He repeats Saunier's last words. From that, Sophie finds that he is the murderer. Lee says that when the history is written, murderers are the heroes. Salas is at his safe house. Police gets there and so does Bishop Manuel. Lee lays out his true intention that he wants to reveal the secret that Jesus was a mortal man. Salas is fighting with police and shoots 3 of them. One of the policemen shoots back at Salas and he panics. From behind the wall, Manuel runs towards him and in panic mode Salas shoots him as well. Manuel tells Salas that they were betrayed. That's the end of both. Salas, Lee talking to Lang and Sophie says, Priory failed in the mission. Lee made alliance with the enemy, and asked them for money so they never suspect him. He also made the name teacher. Lee talking to Sophie tells her that you are the answer to the riddle. You can end it all. Open the artifact for me. Sophie tells him she doesn't know the code and even if she did she won't tell him. Lee puts a gun on Lang's head and asks her to open it, still she said she doesn't know how. Now Lang asks Lee for a moment so he can concentrate. After thinking a little, Lang puts in wrong code and throws the cryptex in air. Though Lee catches it but the map inside is destroyed. Lang says Holy Grail is only for the worthy. You taught me that. Police enters the church. Lee finds out that Lang has solved the cryptex and that he has the map. Lang takes it out of the pocket and gives it to Sophie. They read it together and get the hint where the Holy Grail is. They finally reach Rosslyn Chapel, built by the Templars themselves. A guardian spots them and follows them. They go down into the basement and find a room filled with old scriptures. There they find a flower and assume that the sarcophagus of Mary Magdalene was here. The guardian listens to their talk and calls rest of the Templars quickly. Lang, looking at the newspapers and maps, finds that she is the royal blood. The end of the bloodline, last descendant of Jesus Christ. Sophie shocks. They go back up to the church and find themselves surrounded by Templars. They pledge their allegiance to her. At the end of the movie, Lang finds the missing sarcophagus as well. Like, subscribe, and share for more movie previews. And do not forget to hit the bell icon. Thank you.